You trust your partner with everything. Your dreams, your secrets, the multi-million-dollar fund you built from scratch to save your dying sister. You watch them transfer the last of it, $6.2 million, to a secure offshore vault, a final click that promises her life. You celebrate with champagne that tastes like hope. And then, the next morning, you wake up alone. The apartment is silent. The bank app on your phone shows a zero balance. The vault? It never existed. The account? A digital ghost. The partner who kissed you goodnight? Gone. All that's left is a single email sent to every investor, every friend, every news outlet in the city. A video of you, doctored, your voice spliced, confessing to fraud you didn't commit. By noon, your face is on financial news screens as a con artist. By 3, the police are at your door. Your sister's treatment is canceled. Your name is mud. Your life a crime scene, and the person who orchestrated it all is already on a private jet, smiling, holding the hand of the woman you thought was your closest friend. You stand in the rain outside the precinct, the city's lights smearing through your tears, the sound of your own heartbeat a deafening drum of ruin in your ears. And that was the moment I knew the real revenge begins now. The rain on the streets of Boston had a needle-like precision, finding the gap between my collar and neck with vindictive ease. It mirrored the sensation inside me, a cold, penetrating dampness that had settled into marrow of my bones. The police had released me, not out of belief, but because their case, built on that fabricated video, was a house of cards waiting for a breeze. They needed more and they'd find it, because the evidence would keep coming. That was Silas Thorne's way. Elegant, comprehensive, layered. He hadn't just stolen the Astria's fund. He had incinerated the world it existed in. I had no apartment. The lease was in his company's name. No car registered to the fund. No reputation. My sister, Elise, was in a county hospital bed now, the pale blue of the sheets matching her lips, the state covering what it would until it wouldn't. The look in her eyes when I told her wasn't blame, but a quiet, terrifying understanding. That was the wound Silas had truly opened, the one that bled something other than pride. I walked until the ornate brownstones of Beacon Hill gave way to the industrial husks of South Boston. In a lockup unit paid for with the last $200 of physical cash I owned, I kept a go bag. Not for this, never for this, but a relic of a more paranoid past. Change of clothes, a burner phone, a passport under a different name. Daniel Shaw, identity I crafted years ago during a cybersecurity obsession, a ghost self that now felt like my only real skin. I changed in the damp, oil-scented dark, stuffing my ruined suit into a dumpster. Daniel Shaw had no history, no debts, no sister depending on him. Daniel Shaw was free to be consumed by one thing only. Silas Thorne was a masterpiece of cultivated appeal. He moved through Boston's old money galleries and new tech boardrooms like a panther in a savanna of sheep, his intimidation velvet-wrapped. He collected people, not art, their talents, their trust, their vulnerabilities, and displayed them just as proudly. I had been his prized acquisition for 5 years. I saw the genius, the vision, and mistook his predatory focus for passion. Our other partner, Clara Vance, was a connective tissue. She was the one who'd introduced us, her laughter like shattering crystal, her mind a labyrinth of social calculus. She was a friend who'd held my hand when Elise was diagnosed. They were a perfect circuit. Silas the power, Clara the conduit, and me, the fool, the generator. I had built the Astria's algorithm, a thing of beauty that could predict micro-trends in green technology investments. The fund was the vessel. My sister's experimental gene therapy in Switzerland was the destination. They knew every emotional coordinate. Their betrayal wasn't a pivot. It was the planned demolition of a building they'd always owned the land under. Revenge against such people isn't a knife in the dark. It's a slow poison in the vintage wine they serve themselves. It's convincing the fortress to open its own gates. I needed to become a symptom of their system, not an attack from outside. I started in the digital gutter, in libraries and internet cafes, using Daniel Shaw's credentials to access databases, to trace the untraceable flow of my own money. The offshore vault was a fiction, but the money was real, and $6 million doesn't evaporate. It transforms. It became a trail of shell companies with names like Promethean Holdings and Icarus Ventures, a bitter joke only I would get. They'd funneled it through a crypto mixer, but they'd gotten greedy, pulling a chunk out too early to secure a waterfront penthouse purchase for a S. Tiberius, a name I remember from Silas's fascination with Roman emperors. The penthouse was my first window. I got a job 2 weeks later as part of the nighttime cleaning crew for the luxury building. It was mindless, invisible work. I moved through rooms of staggering emptiness, vacuuming carpets that had never felt dirt, polishing surfaces that reflected only loneliness. Silas's place was different. It wasn't a home, it was a showroom. Cold, minimalist, all sharp angles and curated artifacts. But in his office, behind a Rothko-esque painting, was a wall safe, not a digital marvel, but an old mechanical Brune. Silas loved anachronisms, loved things that couldn't be hacked. His arrogance was a pattern. I studied the cleaning schedules, the security patrols. I couldn't crack the safe, but I could plan a gift. In the hollow base of a floor lamp, I placed a tiny passive audio receiver. It stored data on a loop activated by voice vibration. I retrieved it a week later, in the pre-dawn gloom of a Starbucks bathroom, translating the data to sound on the burner phone. What I heard wasn't damning evidence. It was better. It was psychology. Silas talking to himself, rehearsing pitches, his voice slipping from its polished baritone into something tighter, higher, when he was alone. I heard the click of a lighter, the long exhalation of smoke, a habit he publicly denied. I heard him argue with Clara, her voice a whip crack of impatience. He's a ghost, Silas. Let it go. The narrative is set. And his reply icy, ghosts are fiction. I want a body. I want to see the obituary. Then a snippet, a phone call. The zoning vote for the South Bay project is next Thursday. Councilman Reed needs a nudge. Use the photographs. Not the wife, the daughter. The equestrian competition. Councilman Reed was a family man but leading deep into the wavered mysteriously on development projects. His daughter was his pride. Silas wasn't just a thief. He was an ecosystem of corruption. I couldn't go to the authorities. I was a wanted man, but I could introduce friction into his well-oiled machine. From a hacked email account, I sent the councilman an anonymous, encrypted message. Your daughter's safety has been discussed. The vote is being watched. Talk to Detective Morales. Financial crimes. She is not on Thorne's ledger. It was a gamble. Reed could go to Silas. But the mention of a specific detective, one known for tenacity in a phrase not on the ledger, might trigger a deeper panic. The panic of a compromised operation. The reaction was swift and violent, but not toward me. Silas, paranoid now, cleaned house, a low-level fixer who handled persuasion, was found floating in the Charles River. The news called it a tragic accident. I saw it for what it was, a fracture in Silas's calm. He was rattled. My ghost was haunting him. I needed to become more substantial. Clara was the key to the inner sanctum. Her weakness wasn't money, it was relevance. She fed on being the most indispensable person in the room. Her art gallery, the gilded frame, was her soul. It was where she curated not just paintings, but people, brokering alliances over canapes. I attended an opening as Daniel Shaw, art blogger. I looked the part, thick framed glasses, a carefully awkward demeanor. I saw her, a vision in emerald silk, holding court. I waited, then approached, stammering praise for a particularly derivative piece. I saw her eyes glaze over with polite disdain. Perfect. Over the next month, Daniel Shaw became a faint, persistent smudge on her periphery. I'd be at another gallery she visited, asking a clumsy question. I'd sent a fan email about her curatorial vision. The goal was not to ingratiate, but to be cataloged as harmless, a minor satellite in her orbit. Then I leveraged the one thing I had, my knowledge of her past. From a new, untraceable number, I texted her personal phone. The fire at the Newport cottage was ruled electrical. A shame about the portfolios in the attic. Does Silas know you salvaged more than the jewelry? It was a shot in the dark, based on a years-old, drunken story she told about a family loss. The silence on the other end was palpable. An hour later, a reply. Who is this? A friend of Daniel Shaw's. I texted back. He's a curious blogger. Thinks your resurgence after the fire is an inspiring story. Wants to interview you. He's at the Library Hotel, room 712. Tomorrow, for p.m. Come alone, or his next blog post goes to the Boston Globe's archives desk. The threat was vague but tied to a specific, vulnerable point in her history. She would come. She would have to see the face of this nuisance. She entered the room like a storm contained in a bottle. Her eyes, usually so calculating, held a raw fear she couldn't quite mask. When I removed the glasses and the prosthetic dental piece, her face didn't register shock, but a deep, weary recognition. "Lucas," she breathed, "I knew you weren't gone." "Sit down, Clara. You look like hell. You look guilty." She didn't deny it. She lit a cigarette, her hand steady. It was never personal. It was the algorithm. It was too valuable, and you were too attached. To your sister, to the noble cause. Silas saw a weakness. I saw an inevitability. "You saw a payday," I said, my voice flat. "You held my sister's hand while you helped plot the theft of her life." A flicker then, something human amidst the ice. Elise, that was a complication. I argued against that part. But not enough. I let the silence hang. Silas is killing people. Clara, the fixer in the river? That's him tidying up. You're in the inner circle. How long until you become a liability? He already thinks your security is breached. She inhaled sharply. The message about the fire. That was you. I'm in the walls, Clara, and I'm not leaving. You have two choices. You can wait for Silas to decide you're the leak, or you can help me end this. Not for me. For you. What do you want? The ledger. The real one. Not the digital ghost. The physical book he keeps. The one with the councilman, the judges, the favors. The one that ties him to everything. She laughed. A hollow sound. It doesn't exist. He's not a comic book villain. He's a man who loves unhackable things. I said, remembering the Brune safe. He loves history. He loves power he can touch. It exists. Find it. I saw the calculation return to her eyes. The survival instinct overwhelming loyalty. If I do this, I disappear. New name, new life. The funds to do it. The funds he stole from me. I said, you'll get a fraction. A parachute, not a reward. She nodded once. The alliance was forged in betrayal and fear, the only kind that could exist in our world. The wait was an agony. I moved from flop house to flop house. Daniel Shaw's identity began to feel like a second skin rotting on my bones. I visited Elise, telling her lies that tasted like ash. Hope is a currency I had long since bankrupted. Then a text of the burner. The book. It's not in the penthouse. It's in the belly of the beast. The Thorn Capitol building. Sublevel 3, old bank vault. He visits every Friday at 7 p.m. Alone. Code is a date of his father's disinheritance. 101983. Getting into Thorn Capitol after hours was a suicide mission for anyone else. But I had built its next-generation security protocol. I knew its heart and its blind spots. The sublevels were a different world. The building's original 1920s granite bones, cold and silent. The vault door was a monster of polished steel and brass, a monument to a different age. My fingers hovered over the keypad. October 19th, 83. The click of the lock was deafening in the tomb-like silence. Inside, it was a shrine to corruption. Neat shelves held binders, USB drives and Faraday cages, and on a central pedestal under a soft light, a leather-bound folio. The ledger. I didn't have time to read it. I took pictures, every page, with a small camera, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. The evidence within was breathtaking in its mundane evil. Bribes, blackmail, insider trades, the systematic dismantling of rivals, the notation of the Astrias Fund transfer with a simple, chilling check mark. I was sealing the book when I heard the elevator chime. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. There was no other exit. I slid behind the vault door, into the narrow space between it and the wall. As the lights flicked on, Silas's footsteps were measured on the concrete. He stopped in the center of the room. The silence stretched. "I had a silent alarm installed on the pedestal," he said, his voice conversational, echoing in the chamber. "A vibration sensor." He looked at me, old technology, not with anger, very reliable, but with a kind of appraising curiosity, as if I were a flawed specimen. "Lucas, or should I say Daniel? The cleaner, the blogger, resourceful. Clara always said you had a doggedness she admired. She sold you out, by the way, an hour ago, for a better deal. The betrayal was a physical blow, but I found I'd expected it. She sold you out first. A minor fluctuation. I'll deal with her later." He took a step closer. He held a sleek, silenced pistol loosely at his side. "The pictures on the camera won't matter. You'll be a disgraced fraud who broke into plant evidence. Shot by security. A tragic end to a tragic story. The ledger is real, Silas. The councilman, the fixer in the river. It's all here. It doesn't die with me. It's already in a time cloud drop, set to go to 3 major newspapers and the FBI if I don't check in." It was a bluff. A desperate last-second play. His eyes narrowed just a fraction. The supreme confidence wavered. He was a man who controlled all variables, and I had just introduced an unknown. "Then I suppose," he said softly, raising the pistol, "we have a standoff. Your word against a dead man's. My reputation against your ghost." That's when the vault door, with a groan of decades-old hydraulics, began to swing shut. Silas spun, startled. The mechanism was automatic, on a timer he'd forgotten. He lunged to the closing gap, but he was too late. The great steel door sealed with a final, resonant thud. He was locked in his own tomb. I stood there, breathing ragged. The door had a manual release from the outside. I looked at it. I could leave him there. Let him be found on Monday, humiliated, trapped. But that wasn't justice. That was just another hidden crime. I didn't open the door. Instead, I walked to the elevator. As it ascended, I sent every image in the ledger, not to the newspapers, but to Detective Anya Morales, the one I'd named to Councilman Reed. I included a note. The vault at Thorn Capital, sublevel 3, contains the original. Silas Thorn is inside. He is armed. Then I sent the checkmark page of the Estrella theft to the Swiss clinic with a message. Begin treatment for a leased car. Full payment is forthcoming. I exited the building through a service entrance, melting into the early evening crowd. Sirens, different from the ones that had once chased me, began to wail in the distance, converging on the financial district. I walked to the county hospital. I sat by Elisa's bed, holding her frail hand. On the room's small TV, the news broke. Financial titan Silas Thorn arrested in spectacular fall. They showed him being let out, his elegant coat draped over his cuffed hands, his face a rigid mass of fury, his hair disheveled. The fortress hadn't been stormed. It had been induced to lock its own king in the dungeon. Clara was arrested 2 days later at Logan, trying to board a flight to Buenos Aires. The money she'd bargained for was frozen. The revenge was complete, and it tasted of nothing. There was no victory party, no cathartic rush. Only a vast, hollow quiet. The money would return. My name would be cleared, but the man who had trusted, who had built, who had hoped, was gone as surely as if he died in that rain. In his place was this quieter, harder creature, one who understood the blueprints of betrayal. I would get Elise her treatment. I would rebuild. But I would do it from the shadows. Daniel Shaw and Lucas Carr fused into a single watchful entity, forever aware that the most beautiful vaults are often built to entrap their makers. The silence was my kingdom now, and it was enough.